Hey guys, this is Tulis here with another Warlords of Draenor beta video. In this video, I'm going to be looking at the changes to racial traits for all the races in Warlords of Draenor. There have been a lot of changes for two reasons. First of which is the fact that a lot of the racial traits dealt with stats that have been removed from the game. And the second is that Blizzard wanted to bring some parity amongst the races. There were several races that had more powerful racial traits, and so they wanted to kind of even the playing field across the board for all of the races. In the background, you're going to see me playing the level 100 dungeon Everbloom. This dungeon is very brand new, and so it's very overtuned, and so I will be dying a lot to a lot of weeds. So enjoy the background. I'm going to be dying a lot as we go through these changes. First, I'm going to go through the alliance changes, and then we will go through the horde changes. So the first on the alliance that we're going to talk about is the Draenei. The Draenei still have their jewel crafting increase. Basically, every profession increase is still on every class. Every resistance to any type of damage, such as resistance to shadow damage that Draenei have, is still attached to every class. So those are still there. It's the other stuff that has been changed. Gift of the Naru, which was a heal that happened over 15 seconds, it was a hot, has now been reduced down to 5 seconds. That makes it a lot more powerful. Same amount of healing, just reduced down to 5 seconds, so you're going to be getting a lot more bulk healing out of that. One of the first major changes is dealing with Heroic Presence, because it dealt with a stat that has been removed in Hit, and Heroic Presence now increases Strength, Agility, and Intellect, scaling with the character level. So depending on your level, you'll just get more Strength, Agility, or Intellect, depending on what spec you are in the game. So, that is Draenei. The next class is Dwarves. Dwarves actually got a lot changed because they had a lot of specializations that were just expertise increases, and expertise has been removed from the game. So May's specialization in Crackshot has been removed. Might of the Mountain is a new passive that has been added, and it increases the critical strike bonus damage and healing dealt by 2%. So that's really nice, change DPS actual increase for Dwarves that have been there. Keep in mind that a lot of these, upgrades, if you see a lot of upgrades in, little bits of damage, it's to kind of keep pace with some of the classes that already had that damage increase, like trolls with their berserking and so forth. So that's why these are being brought in. Probably the biggest change to Dwarves, though, is the new Stone Form, which Stone Form now removes magic and curse effects in addition to poison, disease, and bleed effects, along with reducing damage by 10% for 8 seconds. It basically is a Cloak Shadows for Dwarves. It's awesome. Huge PvP buff. I think that all Dwarves will love taking this, and I think you will see a lot more Dwarves out there because of this ability. It's not tied to any PvP trinket or anything, so it's great. They still have their resistance to frost damage, and their additional archaeology fragments and surveying faster is still on the dwarven racials. The next race are gnomes. Gnomes have a few changes as well. Expansive Mind used to only increase mana. Well, now they made it so that it actually applies to all the classes. So it increases maximum mana, energy, rage, and runic power by 5% instead of just mana. So that's a nice change. Escape Artist's cooldown has been further reduced down to 1 minute. It's off of the PvP trinket, so you can use it individually, and it's usually just a nice way to get out of roots and so forth. Since they lost Short Blade specialization, which was another expertise ability, they gained Nimble Fingers, which is an ability that increases haste by 1%. So small change there. Some pretty good changes with gnomes, but overall I think dwarves kind of take the cake right now. The next changes come in the form of humans. Now, humans had mace specializations, swords specializations, those have both been removed. They also, I believe, had increased spirit. Since spirit's a healer only talent, they didn't really want that either, so that has been removed. And instead they've replaced it with the human spirit, that's the original name of the spell. It's now been redesigned. It now increases versatility, scaling with character level. I believe at level 100 I had 100 versatility. So versatility is the new stat that increases just everything, like healing, damage, absorption, uh, reduction of damage taken. So it's a nice buff overall for humans. If you're wondering why every man for himself is still there, well, because Blizzard has looked at it, and the difference between every man for himself and, for instance, the new Stow form or Will of the Forsaken is the fact that it shares a cooldown with the PvP trinket. You cannot have both. So it's something that you're just going to have to deal with. You know, they can't have those double, standards. They can't use escape artist and then right after that use your trinket. That's something that all the other races are able to do that humans are not, because it shares a cooldown with it. So it saves them 1600 honor is basically what that does if you're a PvPer. They still have their bonus to reputation gains, just so that you know. The last change for the Alliance races comes from the Night Elves. The Night Elves have changed so that their quickness also increases movement speed by 2%, in addition to increasing dodge stance, so they're the only class that actually has an increased movement speed buff. And I believe the changes to movement speed, it makes it additive, so it'll just stack additively instead of times. It was real complicated before. Now it's a lot easier just adding them together. And they have also gained Touch of a Loon, which is a really interesting one, that it increases haste by 1% at night, and then it increases critical strike by 1% during the day. So it depends on day or night whether or not your buff, what your buff is going to be. I don't know how popular this is going to be. It's nothing but a buff for Night Elves, because Night Elves really didn't have a damage buff, and that's why they were given that, because to bring them up to par with all the other classes that have damage buffs, they wanted to, give them something, so that's why Touch of Balloon was added. You still have Shadow Meld, you still have the addition of dodge chance with quickness, you still have the faster wisp form, you still have resistance to nature damage, so that's all still there. Worgen have not had any of their racials changed, so everything that's still there is still applied to Worgen, so you don't have to worry about that. The Horde have had some changes, and to be honest, a lot of them are nerfs. The Blood Elves are the first. Enchanting skill is still there. Resistance to arcane damage is still there. They have changed, or brought in, I can't remember. They have brought in Arcane Acuity, I believe. Arcane Acuity, excuse me for my pronunciation, is a new racial passive that basically increases your critical strike chance by 1%. So there's a damage buff there for them. Arcane Torrent now restores more resources than it did from before. It now restores 20 runic power for Death Knights, up from 15, 1 holy power for Paladins, or 3% mana for the mana classes, up from 2%. So basically that has been buffed. Arcane Torrent, that portion of Arcane Torrent has been buffed. So that's a nice little change there for Blood Elves. And actually, they got buffed compared to the rest of the Horde races to bring them up to line with some that were a little, they were outliers. The next change is in Goblins. They have a really small change in that they now have Time is Money. It now grants a 1% increase to haste, up from only attack speed and spell haste. That's really just more of a verbal change for the most part, instead of an actual change to their abilities. So they haven't. It's more of a tooltip, I guess you could say, change, or an ideology change, because they've gotten rid of all those attack speed increase and spell haste and whatnot. It's all haste now. So that's just a small change to that. They still have the rocket jump forward, they have their launch rockets, they have their vendor discounts, their personal bank, and their alchemy skill, etc. is all still there, still intact with goblins. So very little changes with goblins. Orcs received some nerfs. They did have some specializations in the axe specialization, and the it was just the axe specialization that was there with the expertise. It did not get replaced, and that is because That's because their enrage that they had was not nerfed. It's basically the trade-off is you no longer, you no longer have that specialization, but at the same time, you're not going to get any buffs to compensate because of that enrage. Command, which was the pet damage increased by 2%, has been cut down to 1%. And hardiness, which was the reduction of stun effects by 15%, has been cut down to 10%. So orcs have been nerfed pretty much across the board on everything they did. Tauren are on the other side of the spectrum, so they got buffs. They still have their herbalism and their speed of herbalizing, picking herbs. I don't even know how you want to pronounce it. Whatever. That's still there. Their resistance to nature damage is still there. They have changed their maximum health increase. They've changed it so that it now increases stamina by an amount scaling with character level, instead of just increasing base health pool by 5%. So, I can't remember what it was. I think it was around 189 at level 100. So, that's what you can expect out of the change to that ability, to endurance. Brawn is a new racial passive that increases critical strike, bonus damage, and healing done by 2%. Exactly like dwarves. Once again, this is to bring Tauren in line with orcs with their, abilities, etc. Or trolls, which we'll get to in a second. So, nothing but some buffs there for Tauren. Moving on to trolls. Trolls got hit with the nerf bat big time. They lost their expertise with ranged weapons, but they didn't get anything to compensate for it. Beast slaying, it used to increase damage against beasts by 5%. Well, now it just increases experience earned from killing beasts by 20%. So you lost flat 5% damage on beasts right there. Berserking, which increased haste by 15%, by 20%, is now been cut down to 15%. So another nerf there. Trolls got nerfed bad, just like orcs. They're trying to bring some parity across the line, and so that's why trolls got hit. The last change is with undead. Undead, Will of Forsaken's cooldown has been up to 3 minutes from 2 minutes. And that was the removal of fear, sleep, and charm. The reason for this is it was a semi-trinket that was not tied to every man it was not tied to your PvP trinket like every man for himself was. So you could use both of them. And so that is the reason why its cooldown has been increased. It's all parity changes. They can still consume corpses, and they can still drain health, and they are resistant to shadow damage. But that is the major change to Will of the Forsaken. And also, small little change, I don't know if this matters too much to you, but they can now breathe underwater indefinitely. So if you want to go as a undead warlock and summon someone somewhere that is way underwater in the middle of nowhere, do it if you just want to have fun. So that is all the changes to the racials in Warlords of Draenor. I hope you enjoyed the background as I was going through this, because we did get destroyed a lot. So I hope you enjoyed the background, and I will see you guys later in the next video. Tail us out.